G'day guys, I'm continuing with the Spitronics loom. So last time I laid out the loom and I put some tape on it and I've sized all my wires to the correct length. So it's looking like this. Got a piece of vacuum cleaner tube to what I'm used to dealing with. Comes along here. Okay, it's split sleeve. It's actually split sleeve. Out to injectors. Injectors. Round to the coil. This is the side coil. Crank angle, and I've got an oil pressure wire in there. Down the back I've got my lambda, which I may not be using. That looks like the MAP sensor. A couple of earths. And a start wire for the start trigger. Down this side, injectors and the air temp sensor. There's air temp. And more injectors, throttle position, some water temp, idle speed, and a coil. And of course there's a temp for the ECU, 2 wires, and a temp for the dash, or 1 wire. And that's it. That's the whole loom. If you're paying attention too, you'll notice here, if you're paying attention, I do have little bits of shrink wrap on there. I've got some plugs, different plugs. I've got my crimpers and I got my strippers. It's always a good day when we've got strippers. So I'm going to go through and strip some wires and we're going to put some terminals on. I've had a bit of a look and I've looked at the plugs. I've familiarised myself with my E31 diagram and my E24 diagram. I've made a note of a couple of interesting things. Just the numbering, you just got to watch that. We'll talk about this further, but things like the TPS, the numbers are a little bit different to what we'd normally work with. I've got the injectors laid out, hopefully in the right order, and we're not touching the relays at this stage, so I'm leaving that stuff for later on. I do have my big rubber grommet on there as well. So we went through pretty quickly, strip some wires, looking at my terminals. Only a little. As I've said, I'm not so used to using split sleeve. I use it on my standard measurement because I wire a lot of standard measurement, but not so much when I'm doing an aftermarket. And I'm really interested to see how this little ECU tunes up and how well the engine runs when I'm done. I normally use an ECU that costs considerably more and it does a lot more stuff, but a lot of the time if you're not needing all that extra stuff, then it's not going to matter too much. So far this thing's been fairly straightforward. I've got a couple of little concerns with the different numbering, but we'll sort that as we go along. We're stripped, ready to start crimping. So it's really important that you take the time to lay it out, and for me I like to understand what wires are doing what, where they're going to in the plugs on the ECU. Especially, so normally I'm not using a pre-made loom or a fly lead. I start from nothing with some plugs, and some wires, and I feed everything in. So I want to know how things are run and where they go. Found it a little bit strange that the shielding was the power supply out to the stepper motor. But I've worked with what I've been given there, and it's going to work, should work just fine. It's a little bit like a Microtech in some ways with some of the stuff that's made up. And on those, the Loom is a little bit different to how I'd normally use them as well. But I'm also doing it the way a lot of people would do it at home, even if it's not the way I would normally do it myself. As a good example to show that if you follow the instructions, hopefully at the other end we get a good result. So I'm starting with the crank angle sensor. And of course we've changed that trigger wheel to the one that came with the kit, so it doesn't run a cam sensor, which means it has to run group injection. So we crimp some terminals on. Don't forget the seals. I probably should talk about soldering, eh? Jay, should I talk about soldering? If they're doing like a little pigtail, or crimping, if they're doing a pigtail. I don't like pigtails, unless they're actually on a real pig. But I probably should discuss that. We'll get this one done. So, diagram. It says here, blue for the signal, and red is the crank negative. So normally, the signal is in number 1. So I put that into pin number 1, which, looking at the back of the plug, they're actually numbered. They've got, has this one got the numbers on it where you can see? I think they're actually down in there. But the one on, when I'm looking at the back of the plug, on the right-hand side. So when I flip it over, number 1 is normal, like a book, is on the left to right. So red goes on the other one. So that's what the diagram says. We'll see if that's the reality when I get to the other end. I'm trying to put the terminal on upside down. Job done. So that's really quick. Now some guys will want to use a pigtail. I'm going to get a pigtail. So if you're doing pigtails, where you get a length of wire and you want to join it to the ECU, soldering or crimping will both work fine. So if you're soldering, you want the least amount of solder possible. And I'll do a twist like that. And then I will solder that. And then I will use some good quality heat shrink and shrink over top. So it's a good strong joint. And you don't want solder, so much solder that it runs down the wires. You just want it in that spot there. If you're crimping, then the same thing applies. Nice little crimp. And then shrink wrap over the top. I very rarely solder. I actually try to minimize joins in the looms at all times. This loom has got the 4 injector branches, power feeds for each side, so that's 6. The join for the earth, for the air temp and water temp, and the join for the power supply to the shielding on the idle speed. That's all. Everything else that happens down in this area here by the computer itself. So that's where I have it. So if there's anything needs to be checked, it's easy to get at instead of being sealed up in that loom. There's big discussions over soldering or joining. At the end of the day, a good connection done properly is what you want. Don't twist and tape. Don't do shitty solder joins. Don't do poor crimps. Right, enough of that. Let's get back into doing, we'll do the coil. Okay, while I'm at it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check that crank angle input. I'm going to grab this one. Crank angle goes into this harness. E24 blue. crank angle signal. It says it's in pin 12. So normally when I look at these pins, I would number differently. So I'm going to flip it over like this, and I'm taking that number 12 is this one here. Continuity test. It falls out, saying that this is number 12. That's there, that is correct. Okay, so looking for the sensor, the crank angle sensor earth. We come along here, it says red crank sensor power. Pin 6, there it is there. And that's why it makes a note about the jumpers inside. What I will do when I put all this together is I'm going to check that before I plug it in, doesn't have a 12 volts to confirm that the jumpers are correct. Checking stuff like that, I think, helps to understand how the management works. And you get a better understanding, so when there's problems, they're easier to fix. Because often when you get a problem, if you don't know how stuff works, it's a lot harder to find the issues. Okay, I'm going to do some coil powers and coil triggers. I'm going to start with this side coil. Got my shrink wrap, got my seals, on they go, and we crimp them up. Okay, now for the plug, the diagrams, I think they just show positive negative. Yeah, they just show positive negative. On a 1UZ, the power for a coil is the one beside the lock tab. Oh, that feels good to me. And we'll do the top coil at the same time, and then we'll check some continuity. So for the top coil, again, power beside the tab. I should actually talk about colour, because this one's got the black red. It's for the trigger, or the negative. And then I'm going to do some continuity testing just like the last one. Black purple for the side coil, black purple and number 1. So I'm testing the black purple wire into the E31 on pin 1. So I put the plug looking like that. Perfect. And the top coil, black red. On the diagram, pin 6, that should be just above pin 1. Perfect. That's coils done. The power feeds for the coils are over in this loom here. Now, for injector plugs. If you look over 1UZ wiring looms, you'll find that some of them have the injector power and earth to 1 and 2, and some of them have it backwards, the other way. That's because injector wiring doesn't matter. They work either way. I just make sure I have them all the same way, just because I'm being fussy. And I think it's a bit more professional. Right, what are we doing? Oh, we're doing those injector plugs. Right, crimping and seals. So I've already stripped, of course, and I've just given it a fold on this. Seal on. And this is where new connectors are way faster also than doing pigtails. I also see guys reusing second-hand shitty connectors, and that's just dumb. You're going to end up with issues, or with broken plugs. I see some guys, they send me videos and I see the wiring and it's just a rat's nest. Or a bird's nest if you prefer a bird's nest. So it's no wonder they're having trouble setting everything up. It's worth taking the time to do this job properly, and then you'll get many years of use. Oh, there's a terminal in the valley. It's terminal, yeah, it's terminal. Do we have a bull coming past? Because there's a lot of noise happening out there, and I don't think we're meant to have bulls coming past the workshop. Oh no, just bulls by the workshop making some noise. Don't good fellas. Problem is when they start off like that, they make lots of noise later on, eh? They get wound up. The big white one, he wasn't scared of people. And I numbered my injector plugs. So number 1 should be black white. Number 1. Black white, yes. I'm going to put trigger in number 2, so power in number 1. Black orange for number 3. Number 7. Oh no, number 3 was black brown. It just looks orange. Let's just double check. No, that's definitely brown. Number 5. Number 5 is black yellow. Black yellow. If you get the injectors in the wrong place, it will still run, and most people wouldn't even notice a difference. So we must be black orange on number 7. Yep, black orange on number 7. And again, I grab my multimeter and I'm going to check each of those. Black white is in pin 3. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Pin 7. Just double check. 7. 2, 3, 4. Pays when you go on the right hole. I was in pin 6. It's in pin 7 like it should be. Yellow. Yellow is 5. Black yellow is pin 8. I'll get it right this time. Perfect. And that one's pin 2. Awesome. And injector power is in one of these ones. It's that one there. So that's injectors done, and we put the little tab in. Well, that's the injectors on the left hand. And then I repeat the process on the other side, checking, confirming they back to the ECU, crimping terminals on, putting plugs on. Let me get that done. Just push all the buttons. Right, we're going to do, yep, the temp sensor. So we've got the earth here, which is a white wire, and it's shared with the air temp. Multimeters don't work when they're not turned on. And there's giggling from the back of my workshop. And back to the ECU. So there's a ground in the E24 on pin 4. See how my memory goes. But it's not there. But it's a little external ground that pops out. Appears to have that temp sensor ground. As that's both temp sensor grounds are there. Yet the map sensor ground, which is black over there, that one goes back to pin 4. I'd normally prefer to have all those grounds at the same point. It's going to work, it's just not a preferable way for me. And let's see, we've got a map sensor as a 5 volt. Pin 9. 6, 7, 8, that one, 9. And the 5 volt to the map sensor will be shared with the TPS. And they are. Oh, there's TPS earth, which is the black wire. Is that shared with the map sensor? It is. So map sensor and TPS earths are shared, and the two water temp, the water temp and the air temp are shared. Water temp should just come back to the plug here. Seven. Beauty. And air temp, pin 1. Yep. Map sensor is blue. Pin 3. Bang on. And TPS over there. Pin 2. That's awesome, that's easy. So now I'll take those and we'll put some plugs on them. So the air temp, and it doesn't matter which way around these go. Water temp, again, it won't matter which way around they go. Make sure they slide in and go click. Yeah, nice firm click. TPS. Now this is interesting. I've got a TPS plug. This is a factory TPS plug. Plugs are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, when you look at it from this side, it's from left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it gets reversed from the back. 1, 2, 3, 4. And factory at number 1, they have the earth. But in this one, they've got the red wire to number 1. The signal is in pin 3. Pin 2 is an idle switch, and it's not used on this ECU. And so the earth, black wire, goes into pin 4. And pop the tab in. So it's not done the same as normal Toyota, which is a room for a bit of confusion. We'll see what it looks like in the software. Map sensor, really easy because it goes, the red wire goes to the red wire, and the black wire goes to the black wire, and the blue wire goes to the blue wire. So that's nice and simple. I'm just using a good universal type plug here. Righto, the last one to do, or the last couple, we've got lambda, and I'm just going to put a universal plug on that. I've got my start trigger in here, and the idle speed. So for idle speed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the 2 center pins in. So they are the power supplies. We're going to get the right diagram, there we go. And it's got the picture here, and again they're numbered, number 1 at the top of the connector on the right hand side. We're looking from the back. It tells me red goes into that one. And 3 is green. 4 is yellow. 6 is blue. Done. So we've got all our plugs on. Now I'm ready to move into by the ECU. And so I'll come back to that. I think we'll do that in another video. We'll do a relay box and fuse box and the power supplies to the setup. And so I hope it's been helpful for putting plugs on, and we'll see you in the next one.